So again, thank you, Dirk and Sheena, for allowing me to share my journey. I just want to kind of take a moment here just to ask you all to imagine you're back on the res. Some of you might be, I'm not, but just imagine you're back on the res and you're sitting at grandma's table, grandma and grandpa's table, and the wood fire is going on in the back, and they have a nice cup of coffee. Some of the scenery here just is what I grew up seeing as a youth. And you're sitting there just listening to KTNN on the radio and just relaxing. So, and then you hear a knock at the door and you're like, hey, Shinten, who's that? Who wants to come by at this time, right? So you say, Wishtan, come in, the door's open. So the person comes in, but the person here is you all coming into my house, my personal space, and I'm here to share with you, my career academic, and just tell you the story of how I got to where I am. And I say, here you go, nice hot cup of coffee or tea. So hold that in your hand and just listen. So thank you for being here and being able to listen to my story. So again, I'm Dornell Pete. I am originally from Shiprock, New Mexico, and I currently live in Seattle, Washington, where I am a student at the University of Washington in the epidemiology department at the School of Public Health. She toy glini nishle tabaha bashishi titsakari de she glizitlana shanella. And if my relatives are out there, hello. So I wanted to start out with talking about a realization that I've just been with me for a long time, since I was from a young age, just seeing my own environment and growing up in Shiprock and just interacting with my community. And one thing I did notice was that, there was these questions I had. Even at a young age, you see things that maybe are just not right. And you're wondering, why my family members may have certain issues, why certain family members have issues with substance abuse, why when we cross over to the border towns that we see that, why we might be living in poverty, why our housings are different, and perhaps too, why my relatives are dying at a young age, and why is there violence that I experience on the reservation versus those then off the reservation. And also, the shame that it brings to you as you're experiencing this. So at a young age, I really think this was what I realized, that there was just some unbalance with this. And at that point, at that age, I didn't know it was disparities. Like, we see this difference and it can be described in that way. So personally, I've experienced these hardships and challenges, as well as, being able to recognize this and trying to understand how I can use this. So, and this is the stuff that the narrative tells you about who you are. You read in your journals, you read in your public health journal papers, and even the statistics tell you that, that 10% of us Native folks will earn a bachelor's degree. Less than 5% will earn much higher degrees, such as a master's or pursuing a PhD or professional degree. So in essence, the odds are stacked against us. The odds say that you'll have these outcomes in the future, and this is how it's projected for you. Yet there's something underlying all of this that pushes you through this. And that's something that pushed me through personally. And that was my foundation. And this photo here is a collage of my family, my personal, grandma and grandpa, my Che and my Nellies, as well as my, immediate family, my aunties, my uncles, even friends who have been there through the hard times are actually family. So this is a collage of the folks that are just real meaningful in my life. So one thing in this foundation that really occurred to me was that, family is important. They were the ones who were the teachers as I grew up, as I was working on the farm of my grandparents and harvesting, planting, tilling. Really hard labor is something that I was instilled with as a young person, and working on the land and respecting the land. My grandparents were part of this 5-year legacy of 5 generations of farming, and still are doing it. Even my nieces and nephews are still working on the land that my grandparents did. And they were really good role models for me. They really not only told you that they cared about you, that they really want you to go far with your education, but they really taught me how to do it. And they were the ones, there when you had questions. They were there to provide some advice and just always be there. So it was a sense of resiliency that I had for me, that was valuable. And then the stuff that, that carried me forward is the values and being appreciative of what I have, and always to be humble about myself as I go forward and how I carry myself. And as well as just to focus. And one thing as I was growing up, one thing that, in through the challenges, being on a budget or helping my grandpa sell his harvest, was that I was the one doing the tallying. I was the one budgeting the books, so to speak, for my mom, or for my grandparents, as we were selling stuff, because that was their earnings, and making sure that we were within budget. So this math thing was something that really drew to me at that young age, because I was, already adding and subtracting, counting. So that got me focused in, the sciences and math. And that allowed me this foundation to push that barrier. So the focus that really got me thinking about, how all of this worked out for me, as I said, I was there through these challenges to problem solve. If we couldn't make ends meet when we were young, had to problem solve how to get through that, how to, get the meal or pay the bills, or get your car going when you only had one reliable vehicle on the res and you had to go to town to get some supplies. Those were real problem solving stuff. And the math and sciences of that, making sure that, like I said, we were within means. And I really took to that. And through high school, I was able to kind of focus on myself in that area of study. Another thing my family really encouraged was challenging myself and growing. And that was something that I felt like my grandpa's instilled in me, was like, pushing myself to, okay, you're planting this, you're putting the seed, you harvest it this way. Now you can drive the tractor. Now you can bale hay. So it was like pushing myself as I was gaining these skills. And then, of course, all my family encouraging me to finish high school and go further and do better for yourself. And I think there was this message in my family telling me, like, we've been through kind of the hard times. We really need to get out, and we're going to invest in you in this, because we want to be better. We want to not worry about paying for the house or the home. So it was really about that. And I think underlying neath it all, it was this teaching that I really didn't appreciate I really not appreciate, but really took for granted was this Navajo native knowledge that they were instilling in me of like family, relationality, working and living off of the land that I didn't really realize at that young age. So through my path and journey and like how I was able to aspire myself in trying to get myself out of Shiprock was in what my family was teaching me was instilling this personal passion for learning and questioning how the world works, how things work. Since I went to school at Shiprock High School, and at Shiprock High School at that young age, I really involved myself and pushed myself to seek summer research or summer opportunities of going to taking classes and traveling someplace and applying for their programs to such as Upward Bound, and get exposed to courses that weren't offered at my high school. So that was something that really pushed me out of my comfort zone in high school. And that was really valuable and got me thinking about other science topics that, you know, I wasn't exposed to, and then something that I really wanted to keep pursuing. And I then also was exposed to traveling and learning from people from different backgrounds and cultures at that young age, and through high school and the summer programs, but also through getting me interested in the sciences, particularly biochemistry. So I was interested in I had a really good chemistry teacher. There's just that one teacher in high school that, you know, inspires you. So this particular chemistry teacher really taught me how to do chemistry. And once I got into college, which I went to Fort Lewis College, I majored in biochemistry, and I was taking a lot of chemistry classes, but I also realized that the body, I wanted to focus my chemistry studies to the actual body. And I then expanded my my major in doing biochemistry. And as a student there, it was I would say my selection at Fort Lewis College was I did not want to burden my family with any college debt and burden myself, because we already experienced that with the debt and the challenges of like making ends meet. So my selection in Fort Lewis was for that one main reason, but also it is a very good school. It is expanded its programs. It now has a public health program. So Fort Lewis really also, you know, I had some very good faculty, mentors there, and still in contact with those folks. But yeah, they really helped me grow in my study of biochemistry. So there, you know, I was graduated from Fort Lewis College and wanted to go back to working with my people. So to go back to Navajo Nation. So I took a position as a chemist at the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority Company, which everyone knows as NTUA. And it was there in Fort Defiance, Arizona. They have a little laboratory behind the main office there. So as a chemist, I tested drinking water sources for harmful contaminants, and I learned about the issues surrounding drinking water for the Navajo people. So like the complexity of access to land, to try and build water lines, electric lines. So learning some of the issues that some of our people were experiencing. And for people who already had access to drinking water, understanding their concerns for, you know, maintaining good quality drinking water, you know, free from bacteria, free from heavy metals and radioactive elements. So there I really got involved too with, there was the company then was trying to make a connection with science and the information of drinking water to the public. So I got involved in a lot of public presentations with the community to share some of, you know, our processes for testing their water. What does their levels mean? What what health outcomes are associated with those particular elements and exposures. So that really got me interested too there with, you know, our environmental health exposures to our people. And that was very, very valuable. And when I also went home, you know, when you're at home, you're working, you realize you're not a student anymore, but I was still so much interested in learning. And during my free time, when I wasn't being a chemist and working, I was always interested in philosophy. Something just made me interested about philosophy. And it was unexpected. So one day I took one of the, you know, course listings from UNM Gallup branch, and I was looking through the catalog and I said, you know, there's philosophy. I'm gonna take the philosophy class. I took my first philosophy class, and I was taking every philosophy class at UNM branch for 3 years. And it was challenging. It allowed me to exercise my scientific mind in many different ways that, you know, that I wasn't used to being, like using chemistry or biochemistry or working with my hands, and allowed me to read you know, difficult papers and evaluate different ideas. And really too, it just kind of got me interested in, like, you know, I think I am still interested in going back to school too. So I kept that educational experience there. And that's something I really value and still use today, and, you know, go back to. So after I decided and worked for about 3 to 4 years as a chemist, I decided to go pursue my Master's of Public Health degree. One of the main reasons I chose to the East Coast is I've always wanted to, like I said, I've always had an interest in traveling, and getting out of my comfort zone. So I applied for MPH programs on the East Coast, and a school in New Haven called Yale University, you know, decided to accept me. And I got into their public health program, and I was excited, and I knew it was going to be challenging being so far away from home. And I knew it was going to be difficult. So I drove from Winter Rock all the way to New Haven, Connecticut, and started my first semester there. And it was probably one of the most challenging part of my academic probably career, just because public health was like a new language for me. Learning about epidemiology, learning the foundations of biostatistics, like just I was reading another book and trying to learn their language. So it was rigorous coursework. I had a lot of writing and a lot of, you know, exams that pushed me beyond my mental and emotional limits. And I think for me, that was, I always, in those instances, I always look back to my family when I question myself. Question myself to the point, like, if I'm good enough to be here, if I'm good enough to even be in this position. But deep down, you know you are, but, you know, you have to keep convincing yourself that you are where you're supposed to be. So in that first semester, I remember I failed my first midterm, big midterm of epidemiology. I was like, I'm just not getting it. I'm not making this connection. I'm not. And, you know, if you can't pass epi, you can't go any further, because that's like the core of MPH. So maybe it's just my learning ability. Maybe it's the teacher, you know, relaying the information. What is it? So I really took to going back, changing my study habits, seeking tutoring from the teaching assistants who gave me one-on-one that was so valuable. I attended study sessions, and finally a switch went off. Aha, I finally made the connection and I loved it. And when I assigned, when I got into the MPH program, I was only interested in environmental health. Then EPI just opened up for me. I took every EPI classes I could take, and I concentrated on epidemiology. So that, to me, finishing my master's was a big accomplishment, and I eagerly wanted to use this skills and knowledge and go return home and use that for the populations in the Southwest. But I just also want to mention too, during my Master's of Public Health program, like many of you, you might have to meet a requirement of a thesis or a practicum, or for me, it was actually an internship. So I had to do an internship in between my first and second year, and I was able to work for the US EPA in Denver in the environmental justice program. And I don't know, by luck, I got this intern position, and I was in Denver for a couple of months. And my assignment, my project there was to build a database for child health facilities on the reservations within Region 8. So all the tribal reservations within 4 or 5 states. So like Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota. So it took, for me, that was kind of like really hands-on. That was cool for me to learn a software system, but call people, gather this data, put it into a database. And this environmental justice program was using this database to help with outreach for a lead prevention program in children. So once that database was built, I was able to share health education information with those facilities and organizations. So that was a cool project and got me to see different aspects within a federal agency system, but also like put some of those skills that I learned in my first year into practice. So like I said, after finishing my Master's of Public Health program, I wanted to return home. And in returning home, I wanted to, work. I made sure that I did not want to work for a federal agency. I have this passion in my heart to work with nonprofit organizations, just because it's for the people, and it's something that I feel that has more of a connection with the voices of community. So in returning home, I knew I was going to work with some sort of nonprofit, and a lot of tribal communities are nonprofits. So I called up Navajo Nation, and I talked to a person there who was directing the Navajo Tribal Epidemiology Center. And she says, yes, we just started this program. Let's get you in here temporarily and see how things go, because it was a new program. They weren't sure how things were going to work out. So I went home and traveled all across the US and started work at the Navajo Epidemiology Center. And that was their first year, actually probably their second year of starting their program. So at the epidemiology program, the Navajo Epidemiology program, I was there for about 5 years and was exposed to many aspects of public health and health issues that I could imagine. One thing I do realize in working in tribal epidemiology centers, you do wear many hats. You are not focused on one issue. You're focused on many issues: chronic disease, infectious disease, response, data, health policy. So you're pulled in different directions. And so that gave me the experience to hear different issues. that is happening on Navajo Nation, where they were focusing. And at that time, when I was working, the major issue was around renewing the Health Improvement Act. And so that was a big issue that was there, that was took much of my time to help with trying to figure out where our health priorities are, getting data to help support our health issues. So that was one of my major tasks there that I was able to learn. And another major aspect of my work involved, using data around cancer and maternal child health, which I'll speak about pretty soon. And then when I was at the Navajo Epicenter, I really realized that, working with one tribe is really awesome, and it has its unique experience working with multiple states within that area. But I really wanted to expand my knowledge about working with other tribal communities, and also about collecting primary data, like actually working with the community. At the Navajo Epicenter at that time, and I think it's much different now, at that time was just in the office getting the data. I felt not quite connected with the community yet. I wasn't working on a particular project with the community. So I applied for a position at the Albuquerque Area Tribal Epidemiology Center, and they hired me. In there, I was able to collect primary data around behavioral risk factors, implementing an actual health survey in particular communities. So I was there working with a community on getting their surveys developed that was based on what they wanted and what they wanted to measure, all the factors they thought were valuable in their survey. So we had multiple meetings on that, creating an instrument, going through the proper approvals to get the study, the project going, then implementing the project, then finishing the project, doing the analysis, seeing the project all the way to dissemination. So that was something I really wanted to gain. So I was in the field, like a field epidemiologist, collecting the data. And that is what the Albuquerque Area Tribal Epidemiology Center really gave to me. And I had a really good mentor there, Dr. Kevin English too, who helped me guide, push me to, apply for little mini grants for my projects, to how to write reports, how to think about data differently too. So that was really valuable for me at the Albuquerque Tribal Epicenter. And I'm currently an epidemiologist at the Urban Indian Health Institute here in Seattle. For some reason, I can't break away from these tribal epicenters because I just feel like they've just given me so much through the years. And at the Urban Indian Health Institute, I work with multiple organizations in an indirect way in regards to data. We work for all, we serve all the urban centers across the US, and there are about 32 urban centers. And there's also organizations within those areas too that we also work with. But one thing that I'm really learning right now at UIHI is our urban American Indian health needs. And this has been so valuable. And I have great mentors there, Abigail Echohawk and Adrian Dominguez, who've really pushing me to learn these issues, how to frame these things, and in a way that I was not exposed to in the Southwest, thinking nationally, more indigenous worldview of things. So that has been something I've really been using at this point. So all of this is really just speaking to my epi skills, my public health skills, and what I'm able to give back. This is my gift. This is the gift that I've realized that I have, and I am able to share with my community, with my family, in other tribal, wider tribal communities. So there is this, I had another realization. So I felt like after I was in the Southwest working as an epidemiologist, there was something missing. I wanted something a little more. and, you know, realizing that all these huge disparities, but the question comes up, so what, right? We're documenting these. These are important for our grant proposals, and they're good for telling the story to get the money, but what's the so what, you know, like how are we implementing, how are we improving these health disparities? How are we reducing them? So that's always was the question I was having. And I realized too that learning was just evolving. That's something that I have just been doing this whole time. And networking has been important to me, and I had to continue to network. And also the desire there for expanding my epi skills. I knew that, you know, I had certain limits about how I wanted to analyze things, like how I thought about developing my questions of answering, you know, a problem. So this is something that I really wanted to expand my skills on. And also there was at this point where I think many of us have been exposed to about, you know, really questioning what health means within a Native lens, and how are we going to reclaim our health as Native people. And it seemed at that point when I made my decision was very theoretical. Now is trying to understand that more practically. So I always had these questions and pushed me to you know, pursue a doctorate degree and you know, apply for a PhD program. So this is where kind of my heart was, something was missing and I needed to pursue it. So on the left side here, train yourself, as Yoda would say, oh wise Yoda, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. And I felt like, yeah, that was thinking about it now. I mean, it was wide words when I first started, but young Grogu here, young Yoda at the bottom here. Now I'm at the University of Washington. I'm trying to be able to understand what that really means, but also question it. I think there's very much truth to that Yoda saying, but also trying to figure out, you know, how do I be successful in this without losing who I am? So one of the major challenges in my PhD journey was exams. Again, this is something that it's just a different way. I don't know if it's like Navajo native way versus non-native way of how they frame questions or how my mind thinks. So exams weren't always, you know, I did well, but just some things just still don't click for me. So I had to really work at that as well. Exams, your quantitative exams, your qualitative exams, your actual general final exam. So those tests, trying to get through those hoops is something that was always a challenge. Funding was always something I always had to look for every year, and trying to make sure that I was, you know, not accruing debt, being able to look for new positions that will allow me to have some funds. I felt also not connected. I had this image of coming to Seattle, being surrounded by Native tribes locally. I didn't really see Native people at the university. I didn't really see Native people in Seattle. So I really felt disconnected. I really missed the humor that I was getting back home, and laughing, joking, and all of that stuff that really knows that you're around your people. And also about writing. Writing was something that is always something I'm, you know, something I always am working on. So writing for your proposals, writing for your assignments, and that's something I really had to challenge myself and trying to push myself to improve. And as well as health, I think when you're in a system where they're trying to teach you how to do epi, how to do biostatistics, and how to see health, I think I've always had this resistance since I started with like, what does health mean for Native people? What does it really mean apart from what they're telling me of what it means? So some of the things for like trying to get through that was like, I had to read a lot, read books, read articles, read beyond that, read the fun stuff, the fiction. And then setting aside time to just write, even just for 5 minutes, like 100 words, 50 words, just write, free writing. Listen to different people's storytelling, different story style. How are you going to be this will help with your translation of information, how you want someone to listen to you. Listening to different podcasts that are now available, especially for Native podcasts that you can listen to people tell their journeys. And then how do you visually put it down? So, you know, being a Native person, if I see something visually, that clicks more to me. So if I can visually draw things, that's something that I was using and helping me get through this writing challenge. And tests, like I said, like I did with my MPH, engage in study groups, my classmates got it. I wasn't ashamed. I was not ashamed to say I didn't get it, and they broke it down for me. Going to my TAs, time management, resetting myself. Like if I didn't do so well, it's all right. You know, it's going to be okay. Just learn what you didn't do well in, and then just keep moving. Going to office hours. And then funding, I had to hustle in a good way. I had to work. I'm currently working. I'm on a research project at the Fred Hutch, and I'm doing my dissertation. I'm looking for additional funding, thinking about my next project, trying to just keep myself taken care of 2-3 years out. Seeking different opportunities as much as I can, try and try again. This is what I've fallen, I got back up. I've fallen, I got back up. And this helped me with making sure I didn't accrue any big, huge debt. Being connected, staying in good relations is something I really value. Staying in good relations with people, networking, that's something I really helped me stay connected. I reached out to UIH. I went to them. I said, I can volunteer. I have these skills and I'm learning with my stats class. I can analyze data for you. So I did, and they said, okay, I think we can pay you part-time. All right, we'll hire you. So that was important for me, and even just at UIH, I expanded my network, setting up meetings with faculty, even the ones I was afraid of, the ones who are in the big woods, who wrote your books. I, met with them, set up meetings with them, and of course, mentoring and talking to other students. And then for me, it was also about the meaning of health through this Native and Navajo lens, and trying to really still figure that out, and really just understanding this balance of risk factors and protective factors, but what really contributes to our overall health. But the root of all my PhD journey has been this foundation that I've already mentioned about my family, the values and the lessons I've learned and stuff I really still hold within me. And overall, you do have to take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. I just can't, highlight that even more. Go for a walk, get back into jogging, de-stressing yourself, go for a hike, get out with nature, get out of your element, get away from your computer, prayers, go to see the sunset, see the sunrise. Those are things. Call your family, just laugh, tell a joke, look at native memes or something, just get out of it for 5 minutes can reset you. Go home, visit your family, see your relatives. So those are some things that really helped me in my PhD journey. So now my cancer research, and this is something that has really been from my experiences from the tribal epicenter, and the experience I gained with collecting, analyzing, disseminating data, and the strong relationships I had built with researchers and health providers and tribal members. This has really helped me kind of funnel down my research and just what I want to do long term. And particularly the Navajo Cancer Work Group has really allowed me to continue that forward. So all this together had really exposed me to these many areas and use of my skills. And in the area of cancer, it was particularly around cancer surveillance survey systems, like the tumor registry data. I was becoming more familiar with cancer patterns that were impacting Native community for Navajo and American Indians nationally, and for urban American Indians, which is a report that we're working on right now, and understanding these cancer disparities. But why are these disparities there? And that makes me ask the question, why? Why are these disparities there? And particularly for cancers that are so much better for a non-Native population. So out of this work were a lot of the reports, and here's an image of these reports that was produced from some of the work that I was involved in. So my dissertation, so this cancer work that I just mentioned had really channeled me looking at particular gastrointestinal types of cancers. And one thing that really stood out for me was stomach cancer. And at that time, I think the work that Priscilla and NAU and U of A group had just begun their study and using the data that was in these cancer reports. And I also too was interested in it, and we're kind of going parallel in our work. So this was my dissertation that I am currently working on. It is called the Navajo BID study. And the BID is the acronym for assessing the gut microbiota and individual diet in the Navajo. And the main goal of my study is to understand the role of Helicobacter pylori, H. pylori, which is a stomach that infects the stomach, which is a bacteria that infects the stomach, diet, and the gut microbiota, which is pretty much the community of bacteria, viruses, fungi in our GI gastrointestinal system, and how that relates to gastric cancer risk in Navajo adults. And the main reason for that is the rates in Navajo are nearly 4 times high in Navajo people than in comparison to white populations. So I'm implementing a cross-sectional study to determine the prevalence of H. pylori infections and its genetic polymorphism, particularly CAG-A, which is a genetic area of the H. pylori that produces this protein called CAG-A. In Navajo adults, which I think is, my question is, I think it's high, the prevalence of H. pylori in this particular CAG-A polymorphism. And I believe that diet is somehow associated with this infection. And I'm using questionnaires and I'm using a stool sample to help measure this prevalence. So this work, I'm hoping, will inform cancer prevention strategies, will help inform and give knowledge to healthcare providers and bring greater awareness of factors that contribute to gastric cancer. And this project actually fits within my long-term goals, which I'm hoping to apply for a postdoc position and ultimately become an independent cancer researcher. So my dissertation was going good and I was ready to implement it. Then COVID happened. COVID-19 impacted my study. And how I was going to recruit participants, I really had to repivot myself. I was initially going to recruit from 2 health facilities on Navajo, but I really had to pull that back and do it safely. And so I'm currently recruiting Navajo adults through social media channels, through flyers, posters, emails, and word of mouth. And I've set up a website, I've engaged with social media and create postings and pages. And to me, I think in attending the Navajo Nation IRBs, this is a kind of a newish approach for researchers to do in general using social media. And I'm finding that social media is an actual tool that we can use. So I am in my data collection phase. I've started collecting data. I'm implementing different recruitment phases of how I'm going to do outreach. I've been engaged with participants. I'm coordinating the logistics with getting my questionnaires and samples back. And I'm just really trying to learn the media platform, how to engage people, how to market to folks' interests, and maybe also bring awareness to particular health topics. So on the top here, left top side is the homepage of my website. And at the bottom here, the only social media channel I have is Facebook, but here I've shared information about the cancer data, what is H. pylori, and some of these views have gotten quite a few views, a couple hundred views. So I think people are interested in these health education topic posting. So I just want to end now. I think my time is about 15 minutes now. I'll just give folks some time to ask questions, but this has been my journey. Thank you for listening, Kehet, for your time on here. And I just want to share this posting that I just recently put on Facebook. This is a flyer that will also be posted in the community. This is an image of my grandparents, and it really honors them and what they've instilled in me. And I just put this in the poster, and a lot of people have really commented and liked on this flyer. But if I just want to make a plug for my study, so if you guys are connected with relatives or families, feel free to share my link to my website and some of these eligibility criteria. I'm looking to recruit Navajo adults who are living in the Fort Defiance or Northern Navajo Agency area. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Dornell. That was such a great talk. We actually have a question in the chat box from Dakota Jim. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can ask by hopping on and muting yourself and asking the question. But Dakota would like to know, how do you balance living in today's world and practicing your cultural values?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Dakota. I think definitely the times are different from where our ancestors were. And I think if I had to, think about it now, I think one thing, as I mentioned in my PhD journey, has been really just to be connected with family. So, thinking about getting the stories and information from them of how things used to be. Unfortunately, I think, my grandparents' generation isn't there to understand, some of that knowledge from their generation. But just going back with familial knowledge and trying to understand what had worked and made us resilient, that I think culture has too is evolve. I guess it's a living thing. Culture is a living thing too. And what may have worked then is very different to what it is now. So some things would apply. So for now, I've been just trying to make the connections of, how I learned from living off the land to make sure I go out on a walk, say my prayers. And I think that's something personally for me is something that I've really practiced, having my own garden, making sure that I'm planting the seeds and foods, eating the foods that I know have my family eats. So I think that to me keeps me really grounded in practicing my cultural values and trying to learn the language too. And I think that's trying to just be humble about that. Like, I'll say things wrong and may not use the right wording and things, but I got to try. So I think that's something that's I'm trying, at least in today's world.
Is there an example where you had to push back to mentors, funders, etc., when advocating for Indigenous communities?
Well, I would say yes. In many of my tribal epi work I have. So there are many examples there, but currently with this COVID-19 issue about accessing COVID data, that is something that we have been really pushing in regards. And I think the mentor I really look to is Abigail Echohawk for that, who I've been learning in this process is, how you frame things, how, getting access to data. Getting access to data isn't enough. We want quality data. We want the best data. And not only do we just, are we going to use it for certain purposes, but we see the longevity of this data set to be used in many aspects. So just seeing the overall purpose for that. So like pushing back on CDC, for example, pushing back on Indian Health Service. So some of those big agencies, for example, like within COVID is something that, we have worked on. And I'm the type of person too, who is, I'm not the real strong advocate who, I think people have different roles and I'm not there to ruffle feathers. And I really do value having good relations in a way that people will hear you, and that's where you have to really fine tune the story about pushing back against someone, because those folks could be really valuable down the road. And I don't always take that negatively. And I think when I disagree on something, I will reflect on it and I'll come back to it. And that's something I try to practice too.
Awesome. Does anybody else have a question that they would like to ask? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to say hi, and I really enjoyed your talk, and I just kind of noticed we had somewhat of a similar career idea. Like I'm thinking about going into epidemiology as well. I'm here at NAU, a biomedical science major, and I just wanted to say that I really appreciated your talk, and I had a question about have you noticed, what are some of the differences you've noticed between research being conducted on the res and then research being conducted off of the res? Because I know the IRB on the res is kind of, so what are some differences?
Oh, wow. I would say that the research on the res, unfortunately, there aren't enough of us, actual native Navajo researchers. And I think that's not the onus on us. I think there was a lot of issues that I think I need to recognize with, using the big words of colonialism, how things were set up for us historically has really contributed to that. And the stuff that I talked about, being shameful, not confident, comparing yourself to that, to achieve those positions, to be in those positions as a researcher, to discuss the issues, because we've lived it. I think that's something I really do notice both on and off the reservation. People who don't look like us are in those positions. So I think that's one of the major things I do see, the similarities. The differences, I think maybe the differences by way of how the research questions are asked. I think typically the questions, for a native researcher, particularly Navajo, doing on Navajo population, they may know really, the questions to ask that get to the real issue, versus an outsider who has the money and has the credentials to say, I think this is a better way of framing the question, but not be really relevant. And those who are off too, I'm just assuming, I don't know the whole detail of your framing of your question, but kind of like I oversee a project there. I don't live there, and it's just sometimes it adds to people's credentials too in that way. I know I'm not answering this like in a smart way, because I do work with a lot of people who are doing research. So I think there needs to be more of us, is what I'm saying. And that is the difference I do see for sure. And the questions we're asking need to be from us. That is for sure. The difference that I do question a lot, whether you're on the res or you're off the res. And the whole community-based thing may matter because those who are off the res may be implementing that versus those who are on the reservation. So yeah, I guess it's a case-by-case issue in that respect.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question.
So I just want to share folks with my information. If they want to reach out to me by email, they're welcome to. I'm happy to talk to students more specifically about the PhD program here at University of Washington, the epidemiology department, and then any other research opportunities that we do have here with, there's actually the Yago study that's happening on Navajo that's sponsored by, that is led by the University of Washington too, that is happening here, or is connected with Navajo. I'm happy to do that. And we have the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center here. If folks are interested, there's some internship and fellowship opportunities too.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So from your presentation, you went to Fort Lewis, you graduated, and you took like a gap year during working. How did you get back into the process of going, being in that student setting and looking for what grad program fits for you?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Yeah, the gap year is, I think it's valuable. I think it's really valuable between your graduate studies. So I would really advocate and encourage students to do gap years and get work experience in the areas you think you're interested in. So I think that's important. And then for my grad school, I actually was interested in, as I mentioned, getting out of the Southwest area. So for my grad school, I was looking to go on the East Coast and go to someplace different, meet new people. So that was one of my main reasons. Secondly, I was interested in a school that was course of, public health accredited. So that's something I also looked into. Funding was an issue because typically master's programs are not funded. So looking at what would be the best financial decision as well. I had to definitely take some loans out for Yale, but not as much as I would if I went to other East Coast public health schools. So that was my main reason for selecting my my MPH program. When I'm selecting my PhD program, though, I really wanted to be on no East Coast schools, and I wanted to select the school on the West Coast or within the Southwest area that was close to Native populations in an area that I really like. So Seattle was definitely, because you're investing 4 to 6 years living in this area. So you want your quality of life to be good too. And you want to be happy where you are. So I felt like I would be happy in Seattle. But the actual program itself is also important. Yeah, so like the curriculum, what research is happening there, how is their curriculum structured by semester, quarter system? Do they have the courses you're interested in? So some folks are interested in psychosocial epi, so they might not have it in your program. So looking at particular curriculums is also very important. And then also people who think that what mattered for me is people who look like you. Do they engage in tribal research or Native American research? So those are other aspects to consider that I did also consider.
Thank you so much. Those great answers as I was looking for.
We have one more question in the chat box from Dr. Sanderson. How did you gain experience in writing grants?
Yeah, so this is one great thing about the University of Washington. Well, actually before that, within the epicenter, because it's a nonprofit organization, we had to keep applying for funding. So that's a good way of practicing grant writing. So in working with the epicenter, how to maintain your grant, how to write for keeping your grant, and then how to write for grants. So that was a good introduction for me. But I was only exposed to different aspects. So it says, okay, Dornell, do your bio sketch, or Dornell, do this little summary piece, but it wasn't the whole thing. Here at University of Washington, in our second year, we have to take a full year of like your dissertation development. So we're in quarter system. So in the first quarter, it was really about putting all your ideas and splattering it on the wall of what your dissertation project may look like and what topic area. Then your second semester or your second quarter is all writing all aspects of your grant. So like your project summary, your research approach, getting all your support letters, your timelines, your costs, the budget. So that was pretty much the second and third quarter. So we got faculty to teach that to us, and we had our classmates to review. And then at the end of the full, this grant writing kind of like, full year course, we had to do our own kind of like mock NIH review. So we had to review others and go through that process, giving scores, what are people looking at, hearing people's critique. So that was really valuable. And that's where I pretty much wrote my dissertation that you submit to the school for its own purpose, but they want you to submit that to an actual grant. So that's where I also submitted my project and was successful in getting funding for it. So that has been my experience with grant writing. And that's something I still, I'm still working on as well.
That's incredible. I think we will stop there. Thank you so much, Dornell, for joining us. This has been so great. We appreciate you taking the time. For those that are still on the call, please be sure to follow the evaluation link that was shared by Bailey. If you are a faculty member or a staff member, you don't have to take the evaluation link. We recorded this session. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel. And if you have any friends that you think would really benefit from seeing this, please share with them. And I do want to share one more thing before everybody hops off. We will have another Native American role model speaker, Dr. Mark Emerson, on March 17th, same time, 12 o'clock. The same Zoom link, but please join us and he'll tell us his academic and career journey. But thank you again, Dornell.
Yeah, thank you. And do listen to my little brother Mark's presentation too.
Awesome.